I grew up in a very traditional Korean household. It was a very chaotic, stressful environment. It was actually kind of dangerous to show your feelings or call attention to yourself. And so I learned to hold it in. And I have learned as an adult that that has not been great. That energy has to go somewhere. In order to really address and focus on the things that you care about and want to do in the world, you need space. Something's got to go, and ideally it's the crappy stuff that you don't want to do that goes. One thread through my work is I always look creatively for a hole that I want to fill.
Dear Family is a podcast hosted by Rachel Steinman, a writer, an educator, and a mental health advocate. And Rachel gets us up close and personal, so we feel a strong connection, familiarity, and comfort with her guests. So settle in and join us as we search for true healing and journey with Rachel and her most interesting guests.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Dear Family, the podcast. I'm thrilled you are here, thrilled you are listening, grateful you are subscribing, and just beyond appreciative that you're following me on all the social media platforms at Right Now Rachel. That's right with a W. Moving forward, I will be publishing episodes every other Tuesday so that I can focus on a few other creative projects. If you are subscribed, you will not miss out on anything. We will continue these wonderful conversations, be inspired by incredible people that are overcoming obstacles and talking openly. I want you to enjoy my incredible next guest, Christine Koh, and remember to take care of your mental health. It's just as important as your physical health. Christine Koh thinks we should all enjoy life by doing less, and this comes from a woman with many businesses and kids who are still at home. She's a music and brain scientist turned multimedia creative who spent a decade in academia, and she was awarded prestigious fellowships at Massachusetts General Hospital, Harvard Medical School, and MIT. On the verge of becoming a professor, and after her first baby, she decided to change her career path to focus on creating content to help people live better, happier, and with elevated purpose and intention. She's the founder of Boston Mamas, a pioneer in the hyper-local lifestyle niche. She co-hosts Edit Your Life, a podcast about making room for awesome, and another podcast called Hello Relationships, where she co-hosts with her husband, who's a therapist, and it helps people stop small relationship aggravations from becoming big problems. She's also the co-author of Minimalist Parenting, a book to help parents enjoy modern family life more by doing less. She's the designer and co-owner of Brave New World Designs, a stylish collection of advocacy-oriented designs where 20% of each sale goes to a different charity related to the design. And she's also the creative director at Women Online, a communications firm that specializes in using social media for good. With the ability to juggle her many businesses and edit her life to get rid of the unimportant, she makes time for baking and decorating gorgeous cakes and spending time with her beloved husband, her 2 daughters, and her new pandemic puppy. Christine, I first came across your name when my daughter's school sent me a link to an article you had written, and I looked up your credentials and I was so impressed with everything you have done and all that you are balancing and with such diversity. I'm really excited to have you. This is the first time we've spoken, so welcome and wonderful to speak to you one-on-one.
Thank you, Rachel. That's so kind. It's just crazy the way this internet works. I know this is the first time we're speaking and we're doing it on air. So Let's do it.
Because this is a podcast called Dear Family, I always like to ask my guests to tell us a little bit about themselves and their family.
I grew up in the Boston area, so I'm a lifer. I've moved around for school, but I currently live in the Boston area with my husband, who is a therapist. His name's Jonathan, and I am the mom to 2 daughters. Violet is 9 years old, and Laurel is 16 years old, and we have a pandemic poodle named James, and he's now delightful. Like, little puppies are hard, but bigger puppies are just adorable. So
Oh, I'm so
been
happy
lovely.
for you and for your
Yeah.
daughters to have a pandemic poodle. How fun
Well,
is that?
it's so fun. And really, it was a shock, but they put together a very compelling poster presentation and companion video. I'm often sold on a compelling poster presentation. I can't lie. I'm a nerd at heart. So
I love it. That meant they really thought about it. Christine, your parents were immigrants and they had 7 kids and they ran a business from 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. What kind of business was that, first of all?
oh my gosh, it was such a classic little convenience store. For Koreans, it's either a convenience store or a laundry service. When Kim's Convenience came out on Netflix, I was like, should I watch this? Will this be funny or too painfully close?
And
It's pretty funny. Yeah.
okay. So your parents were really busy raising 7 kids, but also running a store, which took most of their time. What was it like growing up with 6 siblings?
Well, I'm the 6th out of 7. It's incredible how different the experience is. We're all 1 to 2 years apart, which is insane. My parents were very traditional. So I would say that I'm relieved and grateful to be sort of later because I think they were a lot stricter with my older siblings. It didn't mean there were always people to play with. I didn't get my own room until I was a senior in high school, but with that many kids so close together, it was a tough growing up. It was not easy. We lived in a predominantly white neighborhood. There were all manner of racial aggressions. It was not easy, but it did bring us closer.
You count your 58-hour natural childbirth with your second daughter as one of your best life accomplishments. Without knowing anything, I would agree with that, but tell us why.
I am so impressed. You have done so much homework. I have done a lot of things in my life, but parenting changes you. It changes the direction of your life. The reason I'm not in academia anymore is partially because it's around that time that I became a mom and my priorities just shifted all over. I had wanted a natural childbirth with my first child, but as life happens, I ended up having an emergency C-section after food poisoning on Labor Day. Cannot look at macaroni salad the same anymore, cannot eat it. I was unexpectedly pregnant with my second. I actually had secondary infertility. We had been trying for years and it wasn't working. And I finally was like, okay, this is not happening. It's okay. We have a lot in front of us. And so I gave away all my baby things. And a month later, I was pregnant. As happened. The journey being pregnant with my second, I was like, I would like it to be natural. I would like it to be with the midwife team that I've been working with. But if it doesn't go down that way, it's okay. Like I got to let go. If you could do it another way, I would recommend not doing it. 58 hours, we were spine to spine for a long time. It was a grind, but it was the most beautiful, joyful experience. It was like a party in the delivery room. The medical staff and the midwife on call were just so moved to see that all play out and for my husband and I to be so happy. It was such a joyful experience. I know that sounds crazy, but it was.
I look at the birth of my children as the happiest days of my life. So I totally understand that. And my second was a surprise C-section. So yes, absolutely.
There you go.
You're a neuroscientist and more specifically, a music and brain scientist. Tell us what that means.
Like all good Korean children, I played violin for a long time. I probably played for 20 something years of my life and was semi-professional at one point, getting paid and in a union and all that. And
I would call that professional then.
Yeah, I guess so. I was earning some money, but it wasn't my full-time thing. I was in the union and doing the orchestra while I was in grad school. In college, I had just been thinking, this seems like there should be an obvious connection between music and psychology. And so I started looking into it. And of course, there was this whole field, far more recent than the field of psychology as a whole, but there was an established field, incredible people doing incredible work. I went on this path to get my doctorate at Queen's University in Canada. There's been amazing proliferation of music, psychology, neuroscience researchers up there. I went and followed an advisor. And then I came back and my work in my PhD was really about learning strategies and how the brain sort of parses music and retains it and what qualities of music make it memorable. So I'd work with trained pianists. And then when I did my postdoc, I came back to Boston. I was at a very fancy sounding postdoc at MGH, that's Mass General Hospital, MIT, and Harvard Medical School. It sounded very fancy. It was very miserable, but I was studying the neural bases of sound. I was working with patients, some who had had parts of their brain removed due to different circumstances, and seeing what functions of music perception could be held onto or not. It was interesting because the postdoc got much more granular than the PhD work. Part of that was based on my interest in teaching people music. It's not my current career anymore, but it's definitely still close to my heart because it was just a real big part of my life and evolution as a human.
Do your daughters play music?
Oh my gosh, not formally. Like, I'm the worst tiger mom ever. It's just so funny because you would think, because I'd spent so much time, so many hours training, that I would have pushed that on my kids. But my kids have very different interests than I do. It's sort of coming back around. My mother, at one point many years ago, gifted piano keyboard, standing, digital keyboard, and it kind of sat collecting dust. But during quarantine, my teenager has been teaching herself to play piano. So there you go. Just wait and maybe it'll come around.
I love that. My house is filled with music. Both my girls play a lot of music, which is wonderful. I always am so amazed at how they can hear a song once or twice and then be able to play it back. Or when we hear a song and the memories that it brings us back to. It's fascinating. That sounds like a really great area of study. You got very prestigious fellowships, like you just mentioned, at Queen's University and Mass General and Harvard and MIT. You were on your way to become a professor, and you decided to try a more independent, creative career. And as you said, it kind of coincided with having a baby. And that's where a lot of these life decisions come. Clearly, that was partly what pushed you, but did it involve a lot of bravery? What gave you that, for lack of a better word, chutzpah to change career paths?
Honestly, I had a really good resume, or CV as they call it in academia. I was positioned to go and get a faculty position. And I think there were really three things happening. One, the environment, the situation with my postdoc was actually quite toxic and it was very difficult. And I finished it, but it was a slog and it was really, really hard. Becoming a new mom obviously was huge. And then the other thing that happened during that time, right around when my daughter was born, was my dad got very sick and ended up passing away. I found out about his diagnosis right before I was about to go back to work full time. And I had this moment of clarity where I was like, okay, I don't know how long he has. It's going to be a total painful bunch of red tape to slog through with the NIH, but I'm going to adjust. I'm not going to go back full time. I'm going to ramp it up. I'm going to go back part-time to 3/4 over the series of like 6 months. And I ended up spending a ton of time with him in his final months of his life, which was such an unbelievable gift. And that period of time made me really realize I love working. I'm somebody who needs to work. I feel happiest when I'm creatively churning on ideas. And if I'm going to spend time away from people I love, whether it's my parents at that time or my new baby, I want to feel really energized by the work. And at that time, I just wasn't feeling that with academia. I was a good scientist. I had a good resume. I was ready to go on the job market, but I just didn't feel excited about it. It wasn't enough for me.
We're going to talk about all the things you ended up doing when you were brave and made that leap to follow your passion. I think that's an inspiration to a lot of listeners. You are the founder and editor of Boston Mamas. Tell us about that.
That was my first venture on the internet. That was the thing that started it all. I was a scientist. I like collecting data, like collecting information. So when I became a parent, I had all these friends who were also getting pregnant at the same time, and they'd ask me for recommendations on gear and stuff. And I had recommendations, but I was like, wouldn't it be so useful to be able to put all this stuff in one place so I didn't have to keep sending the same links around? A friend of mine named Andrew, who is a total tech geek, he was like, hello, you need a blog. I didn't even know what one was at the time. This was 2006. He literally helped do whatever magic needed to happen. Things were not as sophisticated back then as they are now. Now you can start a website in 10 minutes, but it was a lot more complicated. But he got it going. And so I launched it. One thread through my work is I always look creatively for a hole that I want to fill. Like, what do I want that doesn't exist out there already? At that time in Boston, there were plenty of calendar sites if you wanted to look for events, but there wasn't really a lifestyle site. So I started it and it took off, and I think people were just hungry for it at that moment. It's still running. It's my 14-year-old baby.
That is
still going.
So great. You continue to be a regular award-winning blogger. You give voice to your fascination with pop culture and parenting, and also intellectually things that are interesting or absurd, which I love because we should be mindful of the absurd. I spent some time having so much fun looking through your blog, and you just posted something recently that I loved of you cutting your hair online. It's a video blog.
Yes.
So the listeners know Christine and I are staring at each other via Zoom, and your hair looks so great. Right now, on the video, you literally cut 2 braids, and it just was funny. Your hashtag was #GiveZeroFucks, which made me laugh even more. And here you are looking beautiful. I just read your piece on feelings. Before we go into talking about some of your other ventures, can you tell us, why is bottling your feelings such a bad idea?
It's so bad. I grew up in a very traditional Korean household. It was a very chaotic, stressful environment. It was actually kind of dangerous to show your feelings or call attention to yourself. And so I learned to hold it in. And I have learned as an adult that has not been great. That energy has to go somewhere. So it's not good to bottle it up. But the bigger problem is that I've found that in my relationships with people, when there's conflict, it's very hard to unravel from it. Because, for example, if I'm having a conversation with someone and it's a very tense conversation and I look totally stone-faced, I look like I'm not paying attention. And people actually think I don't care. So I've done a lot of work on this. I have a therapist that I see periodically. I have a children's emotion chart in my office that I will point to figure out how I'm feeling. It's really dialing it back to the basics.
And you married a therapist?
I married a therapist. Yeah, he wasn't a therapist at first. Whenever I write about this stuff, the thing that is so interesting to me is people are always like, you're so authentic, you're so vulnerable. And it really occurs to me that because of social media, as much as I love it, it really has propelled this feeling we need to show our best side, we need to be happy, and we can be all those things. We can be feeling like we're kicking ass one day and then a total dumpster fire later that day. It's okay to be all of those things.
I love that you recognize that blogging is a way to express those feelings. The other day, I published an essay about my ego getting in the way with a lesson I was teaching to middle schoolers and with my mental health advocacy. And my husband read it and he said, why didn't you tell me? It was easier to write these things than actually have conversations. It's interesting how blogging, you can feel like you can bare your soul, but then you might not have that conversation with someone face to face.
Well, it's so interesting you bring that up because I was just talking to somebody recently about how sometimes when I'm in conflict with something, I need to write it out to organize my thoughts. That's the way I mentally process things. Some people are not receptive to that. You have to figure out with your relationships how to really find a way in the middle where you can communicate if you're in a moment of conflict.
Your second venture was a graphic design business called Posh Peacock. You've been featured in all different sorts of publications.
Started it because there was a hole, and literally a friend of mine was pregnant and I was hosting the baby shower. This was probably 2007. At the time, I had a very specific thing that I wanted for the invite. I was looking for a pregnant lady that looked fashionable. And now you can find that everywhere. But back then you couldn't find it anywhere. So I was like, what happens if I download the 30-day trial of Illustrator? Could I design this myself? Which I know sounds totally nuts, but I did. I downloaded it and I turned out to be really good at vector graphics. And so after I made the baby shower invite and some people saw it and they were like, wow, can you make X, Y, or Z? And I started making stuff and then it took off and I decided to build that as my second internet property. And it was great. I decided to shutter it around the time that businesses like Minted and Tiny Prints that had very robust tech engines came along because they were so powerful and it was so wonderful. And I was ready to let that go. I still use my design skills. I have a lot of fun with it.
I was going to say those design skills come in handy with anything related to the internet. And talk about another one of your businesses, which is you're the creative director of Women Online, a strategic communications firm that creates powerful digital and social media content. And it's rooted in online community and issue advocacy. Who are some of your clients and what do you personally do to help them market digitally?
We work with the very best clients and I love my team so much. We are all women. We call it the Lady Badass team. I just love it. We're totally virtual. We've always been virtual, even pre-pandemic. So we were ready to go when the pandemic hit. But our clients have been all over the place. If a brand or an organization wants to get a message out to somebody, I'm usually the person who comes in to provide some big picture ideas or the really creative idea that might seem a little weird, but I think it might go viral. Or I can help with nuts and bolts on execution and how to do social media. I've worked on everything from Heifer International, which is a fabulous organization that helps families gift animals and do sustainable agriculture. I'm currently working with amaze.org, which is a wonderful free sex ed resource. We've helped with 3 election campaigns, the UN Foundation, just a real range of different types of things and some fashion too, some fun stuff like Bowden clothing. It's a real mix, but it's been so...
We're going to backtrack a little bit. Back in 2013, you co-authored Minimalist Parenting, and it's about enjoying modern family life more by doing less. It's a bit ironic. You're talking about doing less. Your credentials show that you clearly are a very busy mama, but I totally know what you mean. I want you to tell us a little bit about the principles behind the book. And also, I'm curious how that translated recently since our kids are home and we're forced to do less.
The book, it's co-written with my incredible collaborator and friend, Asha Dornfest, also a longtime blogger. Parent Hacks was her original property. I had the idea for the book. I bought the domain. I had just done a speaking session at a conference and people were like, you should write a book. And then I had the idea for the book literally in the airport lobby on the way home. And I wrote the outline and got the URL as soon as I got off the plane. So this is just how Christine Koh brain works. The reason it felt so important to me at that time was that I had been blogging, and Asha too, about just wanting to do things a different way. At that time of parenting life, and it's still like this now, there's this sort of urgency and worry about doing more and getting a leg up on your kids' activities and doing this or that. And I just was like, it doesn't have to be this way. And I don't really want it to be this way. And anytime I wrote about that, I would receive private messages, comments from people saying, oh my gosh, I feel that way too, but I didn't feel like it was okay to do that. So we wrote the book, and really the grounding principle through it is to sort of let go of those shoulds that drive you in your decision making and really tune into what you want to do, what your family's values are, what's important to each member of your family. Those could be different. It's not a one size fits all solution. We address stuff like decluttering, which is obviously very popular, but there's a higher level to it. And not long after the book went to press, I immediately was like, Asha, let's do a podcast, because I wanted to also move out to the general lifestyle space, because so many of the principles in minimalist parenting are really just general issues that anybody is wrestling with. The great irony, well, the pandemic has brought many things, but one of the ironic things is it has forced all of us to edit our lives in such extraordinary ways. From a parenting perspective, all of those activities that we were sort of wrestling with figuring out how to get to and how to juggle with this and that, they just all got obliterated off the calendar. The incredible intersection with minimalist parenting is the time has forced us to tune into things we actually care about, things that we really enjoy, the things we don't enjoy, and that's the stuff that should go. It really has so many connection points that I would have never anticipated, and certainly would never have wished a pandemic on people in order to find those intersections, but we work with what we have.
What's great is that you have this podcast to continue that conversation. You co-host the podcast, Edit Your Life Show, with the same person that you wrote Minimalist Parenting with. You're already now over 200 episodes. Congratulations. What a feat that is now that I'm doing my own.
So much work.
So much work. Oh my
Such
God.
joy.
It's so much work, but rewarding because I get to meet people like you and those opportunities are wonderful. I want to know why you think we need to edit the unnecessary from our life.
Even with our lives reduced as dramatically as they are in terms of travel and appointments and social gatherings, this conversation has not ended. In fact, it is further amplified as we deal with other things that have crowded into those now empty spaces, stress about the state of the world, everything. We cover whether we're talking about optimizing your food situation or thinking about the next thing you would like to focus your attention on. In order to really address and focus on the things that you care about and want to do in the world, you need space. Something's got to go. And ideally, it's the crappy stuff that you don't want to do that goes. We are always advocating for people to continually analyze, not in a heavy-handed way, but to continually tune into that. What are the things that you're pushing forward in life that you're like, oh, I dread this, I don't want to do this? Can you get rid of that in some way, shape, or form so you have more space for yourself?
It's like it lightens you to have more energy, more time. How do you declutter your mental energy?
And there are a number of things, anything from a not great relationship that you've been perseverating on, or a difficult situation with somebody, or bad feelings about yourself. They're all tied together. That stuff really crowds on us. The brain space that you allocate towards worrying about the shoulds for your kids, or how you're perceived as a family or with your partner or whatever. There are so many ways that we get in our way, emotionally, mentally, that can always use some editing and clean out.
Would you say that one of the ways to do that is by mindfulness and meditation?
If you can, it's not for everybody. I definitely have been leaning into yoga, even if it's like 10 minutes in a chair regularly to center myself. One of the best things you can do is figuring out your values, what matters to you, what you want to invest time and energy into. One of the things Asha and I talk about in our book is so simple. We call it a more and less list. And so you literally, piece of paper, line down the center, more on one side, less on the other. And you identify, what do you want more of in life? Any level of things. It could be big things like travel. It could be chocolate in your desk drawer. And then what do you want less of in life? To have some anchors to figure out that stuff is really helpful.
I was just going to ask you, are you a list maker? And you told me about this. So am I. There's something about just getting those thoughts down, and it's very helpful to organize what comes next. You also are now co-hosting a brand new podcast with your husband, Jonathan Baxter, called Chips. I love the idea behind it because it's about communicating better, which we all need. I'm curious. You mentioned that he's a therapist, so I'm sure he's full of great insight. But how is that going? And are you able to compartmentalize the podcast, or is it being brought into family dinners?
In a nutshell, it's great. There were two reasons we started it. One, right before the pandemic hit, literally a week before, we were at a conference together in DC for the first time. We were speaking on a panel together. So that was very different. It was him coming into my world, which was a little scary, but it worked out great. He was amazing. And after that conference session, a lot of people were like, oh my gosh, you guys should have a show together. That wasn't new news to me because he is one of the most requested guests on the Edit Your Life podcast. Anytime he comes on, our people are really into him. Then the pandemic hit and we were like, why don't we put something good into the world? We're home more. We have the equipment to do this. And so we did. It's very different from Edit Your Life. It's less tip-based and more us in conversation, very loosely. And it's fantastic. We will be producing season 2 at some point in this first quarter of 2021.
You're juggling 2 podcasts now on top of everything you do, in addition to the fact that you and your husband co-own Brave New World Designs, which sells on Etsy, and they're advocacy-oriented t-shirts, and they're great. I literally wanted every single one of them.
Oh, so as you can probably tell, I like starting things. I get very excited, and then they just keep going because they're fun and fill a need, honestly. I won't get too political here, but I will just say that after the 2016 election, I was an absolute wreck. My husband was also devastated. And I was really angry. Wind back a few months from the election, I'm a little bit of a font snob because I'm a design person. I would often see t-shirts I would think were funny, but I was like, oh, I don't like the font, or I'd have a good idea for a t-shirt. And so finally my husband was like, you should just stop talking about it. Just make your t-shirts if you want them. I'll research a heat press for you. I was like, okay. So I just started making t-shirts for fun, just for myself. And every time I would post one, like I had a Smash the Patriarchy one. And when I'd post one, people would be like, where can I buy it? And I'm like, I'm not selling. I don't want another business. I have enough businesses. I don't want anything else. Sorry, you can't have one. But then after the election, we were just feeling so upset and just like wondering how to help and what to do. And so I was like, well, we could sell t-shirts and donate part of the proceeds to different organizations that need help right now, like women's reproductive rights, other things. Within 3 weeks of that election, I designed the branding, got the website, took product shots, made new designs, got us all launched on Etsy, and we started selling shirts. And we've donated thousands of dollars by now to about 25 different organizations, whether it's women's health or Emily's List is a really popular one that's equipping women to run for office, all manner of organizations related to the environment and whatever else. It has been such an unexpected ride. Whoopi Goldberg wore our shirt on The View. Alyssa Milano wore our shirt posted on her. I mean, it was like, what is even happening?
So after they wore it, were you able to manufacture enough to supply?
The crazy thing was we were doing it all out of our home studio, which meant that I was doing pretty much all of the production, which was insane.
So you were pressing them yourself?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. Because I was kind of a control freak. This is why we're in a relationship, because not long after that had started, my husband was like, babe, we got to outsource this. Like, this is crazy. And I was just like, oh, I want to be able to make sure everything goes out perfectly, blah, blah, blah. And then finally this year, I just broke and I was like, we should really outsource this. So we have, and it's been amazing. One, it lessens that workload on me, but now I have more creativity to make new stuff. That's been really fun to return to the design side instead of being mired in production all the time.
That's a very positive outcome, because sometimes when you are a perfectionist and you want to take control and you let it go and it doesn't turn out how you like, then it's hard. But the fact that it's at a point where you're happy with, I'm happy for you. But yes, very, very cute. I will have the links to all your businesses in the show notes. You love to read and you share a lot of your book finds on your blog. I do the same. I'm in the mental wellness space, so I read a lot of memoirs and nonfiction that really help you get in on the inside of what it's like to deal with mental health issues and substance abuse issues and find inspiration. I'm curious what you're reading and what genres you tend to go towards.
I love reading. And I will say, for anybody who's like, reading, meh, that I did not grow up a reader. In fact, really discovered reading as an adult. When I was a little kid, we didn't read together. My parents were just so busy. So no knock on them. It was just how we grew up. Later in life, I discovered reading for pleasure. Now it's one of my great joys, especially with my 9-year-old. Every night we curl up on the couch for quiet reading time, and it's amazing. It's my favorite thing.
Together, or you're reading separate?
No, we're reading our own books because she's a voracious reader. So we just sit there and cuddle
wonderful.
up.
I love it.
It's so great. Generally speaking, while I will read the occasional memoir or nonfiction, I love novels. I just love them so much. And whether they're literary fiction, that's great. But I also love contemporary romance.
Is there one that you recommend that we need to check out?
There's so many. What I want to say about it is I had total stigma over the romance genre, because you think of like the little paperback with this sort of smoldering cover and it's like, can't lean into that. And also in my mind, I was like, they're not going to be very well written. But there is a whole contemporary romance genre, incredible writers, beautiful storytelling, but then there's just a little statement in it. My introduction to it was Helen Huang, who's written some incredible romance novels. The central character, it's like a woman with autism. It's been so amazing to uncover a perspective that I'd never read, where the heroine of the story was somebody who is experiencing that. It's pretty cool. I would encourage people to keep an open mind. There are so many good writers out there. And I have to say, it's just such a good diversion when the world is really crazy to just jump into a story and get a little lost.
Christine, at 20 years old, you were at Wheaton at undergrad. If you could write your younger 20-year-old self a Dear Christine love letter, knowing everything you've learned up to this point, what would you tell yourself?
At that particular stage in life, I was in an emotionally abusive relationship. There were a lot of bad things happening, and it put a very hard exterior around me. So I guess what I would say is don't lose sight of your friendships. Don't lose sight of your relationships and the people who care about you. There were people who stuck with me there, but I burned some bridges, and I've since written letters to which I did not expect replies, like apology letters, like years later I wrote them. That was a hard time of life. And I think when we're all finding ourselves in the 20s, it's really important to remember how important those relationships are to you.
That brought back memories of myself doing the same thing over a bad relationship. How wonderful you had that opportunity to write those letters. Did they respond back? Was it
no,
Oh.
Which is fine. When you do something like that, I think you need to do it for you, just to say you're sorry or whatever it is you're going to say. In those instances, I just wanted to say, I'm not making excuses for my behavior, but I just want to explain what was happening. And I'm sorry for the way I treated you. And I really hope you're living a good life. That's all I wanted to say. And there were no responses, but that's fine. That wasn't part of what I was expecting.
It goes along with what you've been writing about with minimalism and blogging and podcasting about that unburdening, not bottling it in and holding it down. That's really good advice. Last question. What do you do that brings you happiness? Do you have any happiness habits?
I do. Well, there are many things, but if you mean like little creative things, I would say if people have been with me on Instagram, they might know that I like decorating cakes recreationally.
Nice, so beautiful cakes.
It's actually ironic. I love baking and baking for people and delivering baked goods, but I'm off gluten and a lot of sugar, so I can't actually eat anything, but I love making them.
You are so funny. Have you experimented with gluten-free cakes?
I've been working on it. They're just not the same.
Yeah.
I've had inflammatory issues in my 40s. Baking for joy is like a big thing for me. We've talked about reading, yoga, and then in the spring, tennis is what I really like doing.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Christine, it's been such an honor to get to speak to you.
Thank you for doing your homework on me and asking such thoughtful questions, and I appreciate it.
It's so my pleasure. And thanks for inspiring us to know that we can do so much when we get rid of all the clutter. And I wish you all the best. Keep up that wonderful advocacy. That's the best. And that brings you a lot of joy, and enjoy your family. Thank you. This is Rachel Steinman. For more information or to contact me with any questions, comments, or guest ideas, please check out rightnowrachel.com. That's right with a W. Thank you so much for listening, subscribing, and sharing, dear family. And if you found value in what you've just heard, I would love and so appreciate a great review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Until next time, I wish you love, happiness, and good mental health.